Hey guys, this is a quick recap of the past 3 videos in which I suggest a new opening line for red and yellow in the main line, namely the Sicilian con variation. So, first thing we looked at was what if after red goes over here, Tom actually pointed out it's better to move here than here. I'll get to that in a second. What happens if blue just takes here? Yellow takes, check. You can't just attack the queen because the queen just moves back. And after you take here, then yellow moves up here, and you can't save the queen with your own as green. So you're queen down in this situation. So that doesn't work out. I think the best move for green in this circumstance to move there, and then what you do with red is you follow up with an attack on the queen. Take like that, and then here you move there, threatening the queen and also checkmate threat at the same time. So, as I said, I think the best move, because you have a check on red and you can prevent the checkmate on green, just move the queen down here to go for, a few different checkmate threats on red, the two queens. And then to make sure that, to prevent that, you have to take the queen, and then you can check. And of course, this is a very serious threat because after you double check red, it moves over here. Blue bishop takes the red bishop, and the queen moves down for checkmate. So what you have to do here is you have to prevent that and move the queen there. Now the reason why I think this move is the best is because it's a checkmate in one threat, and it attacks green's queen. So essentially it's a queen sacrifice, get the queen back, and then check, right? And I think that's the best move. This does not look good, as I pointed out in my previous video, because you have check threats, the king is exposed, looks no good for him. And then from here, I think that's the best move. The reason why is because after green takes, no matter what move blue decides to do, first you attack green's queen. And then what you do as yellow is you can move here, and the queen is attacked, and the rook and bishop are attacked. Not to mention you have a check follow-up threat on green. So for here, I think red and yellow stand better, which is why I think it's a mistake to take the pawn in this opening variation. Now, if you don't take the pawn, if you do what I think is the better move, you move there, right? Then you still follow up with this. And at this point, green has a few options. One of those options, as Tom pointed out, now the reason why you move here is you prevent the queen moving over here, right? So let's say the queen wants to move here instead to come out. Let's say the green queen wants to get active still. Sees yellow queen is active, there are no threats on it, hey, maybe I can get my queen active. Well, at this point, I believe you do the same thing as I pointed out in my previous video, which is what I call the triple play, or triple threat, or however you want to call it, preventing blue queen from taking, very serious threat on red, and you're also eyeing up two key spots on green's camp for attacks. So here Tom suggested there, I think that's also the best move. And I think here what you can do as yellow is you can move here. Now Tom asked, what if, I think this is what you suggested in the chat. If I'm wrong, please correct me. What if you move here as green, right? You still maintain checkmate threat on yellow. Well, what you do here is follow up with this mate threat, right? And no matter what blue does, do that move. So You're attacking green's queen, and you have a checkmate threat. I believe that this is winning for red and yellow. And of course, the other downside of having the queen on this square, as explained in the other video, is that you're blocking this blue queen from coming in here, yeah, to check yellow. And so you take away a couple of tactical moves. So I don't think that's a solid move for green. And now we're looking at this too as a move, and Tom suggested why not move here. I think that's a very strong move. Don't get me wrong. I think that develops. I think it does a number of things, but I think it might not be the best move. It might be a good move, but I'm not entirely sure it's the best move in this line. The reason why is because a big idea here is to box in blue. And if you can maintain checkmate threats, namely moving the queen here, to put a checkmate threat on blue, as well as, well, let's say you do that to prevent the checkmate threat, then yellow moves here, and now you have a checkmate threat on green. And the queen is developed. And now, after this threat is addressed, then I think it's a good idea to consider moving the bishop here, which is also, by the way, now protected by the yellow queen. So I think here's also not a good move for green in this variation. The queen, I think, has a hard time becoming active. Both queens have a difficulty becoming active in the beginning of this opening, while red and yellow's queens are very free. One other variation that we looked at, as opposed to the queen becoming active, well, what if the knight wants to come in? What if the knight wants to see some play? Now, I said in the previous video that we had a pretty nice line where we had a double mate threat on green, but of course it doesn't work now because green's knight is defending that square. If the queen was here, it'd be a different story, but of course that's not the best move in this opening line. So how to follow up from here? I think the same bread and butter ideas apply, which is move the queen somewhere to attack this while leaving the yellow queen space, checkmate threat on green. So again, I think you just stay very aggressive in this opening line. You move there, and then you move there. And you have to do something about it. And here, I think this is still a very solid position for red and yellow because queens are active. You still have checkmate threats, available checkmate threats, namely on blue, and also you have checkmate threats you can make on green, right? So after moving here, I think you'd really have a few options at this point. Maybe you move, well, first you have to, I think, threaten. Yeah, I think the first idea is you have to threaten, leave space for the yellow queen, so I move up here, threaten checkmate, and then from here what you can do is you can set up a mate threat on green. Right now, you also have to consider what about that variation. So I'm just kind of speculating this little bit right here. I didn't look at it horribly in depth, but and another thing to consider in this spot is after you do that, yellow queen I think would be very, very powerful here, right? That's something I kind of forgot for a quick second. But I think after this maneuver, if you plan on moving yellow queen here next, what you're really doing is you're pinning this knight. It's a very powerful there, because even if you move a pawn up, you still have a mate threat. I don't see how green can easily get out of that mate threat. So at this point, what might be best for red is to start boxing in blue's queen now that it might be freer. Now they might not be focusing on blue as much, but perhaps focusing on green. Again, this is a very new idea. Most people have been playing the main line, so I don't really know what the best move is here. Maybe something like that. Or even this. That might even be the best move. Right? Like, there are a lot of things to look at. But I think no matter how you look at it, I would have to say I think yellow and red are definitely the aggressors here, because their queens are very active. And although blue and green may have somewhat active pieces, they're not really doing a lot in this position. And pretty soon, red's knight are looking to develop. Maybe the bishop wants to come out. The other pieces can start getting involved for follow-up threats. But to me, this, just on face value, this position looks very dominating. So that's looking at this knight variation. Another option to consider as green is just to immediately move the pawn up, so that you free the queen, you block the diagonal, leave yourself space to do whatever it is you want to do. You know, you want to insert a check on red, and also you can push the pawn up to put a check on yellow. I think that this opening might be more flexible than the knight move up, even though the knight move up, you know, can threaten. I think it might not directly address yellow's ability to threaten green fast enough, because of course, as suggested, you just follow up with a boxing in idea, and then you might only need to box in once. You might not need to go for this square too. Maybe you can just immediately go in and switch gears on green. So as stated, you know, switching gears, I think this opening is very flexible for red and yellow. It's very flexible, and I think, you know, from a tactical perspective, it's more dominant. I think it's like establishing a center, so to speak, because the queens are active in the middle. Yeah, to me, this opening just seems very promising and perhaps stronger than the main line, which is, of course, obviously not that, which is, of course, to do this. Because this piece, after green does that, I mean, you try to coordinate, you know, bishops here, try to coordinate on some kind of attack, but it's kind of a dead piece until you really attack with it. You know, you also set up a battery on blue for checkmate threats, but they're not immediate checkmate threats that you would have if yellow's queen was here, forcing blue to waste moves, boxing him in. At the same time, preventing him from developing his queen, which becomes a very active and powerful piece, specifically on this diagonal. Right, on this diagonal, he's a little bit more limited. At least it takes at least one more move to get him active. And as you know, in 4-player chess, tempo is everything. On top of that, yellow's bishop here, it blocks yellow's queen coming out here, which I think, is a very powerful post for yellow, because not only do you have this rank or file, whatever it is, you also have diagonal play. But if you come over here, well, I mean, you still have it, but you have to spend an extra move getting out. And I think you have a little bit more space on this side, because on this opening, green's gonna come out here. So you're only really limited to these, whereas over here, you have a lot more freedom of how you want to move, just in general. I haven't looked at this in depth. On top of that, when you have the bishop out here, the main line, green is actively building up counterplay, where you're attacking the rook and setting up check threats on yellow. So I think the momentum really dies down. I think this is a good move. It was a very innovative and interesting idea when it first came out. But now, the more I look at it, I'm thinking that queen out might be a better way of continuing this opening, due to all the threats and the activeness of yellow's queen in this line. So this, again, this is just a summary of the past few videos that I've posted. Thank you, Tom, for watching. Thank you for your suggestions. Thank you, Gilliam, for watching and your suggestions too. And also, thank you, Caius, for your suggestion, your idea about moving the pawn up here. So if you have any ideas, if you think I missed anything, please, by all means, let me know. I'd love to hear. And as always, peace out.